Hello everyone, my name is Jessie Mao. I'm an 11th grader at Lebanon High School, and my project this year was HPCC systems deployment with various Helm chart configurations. And my two mentors were Xiaoming Wang and Gaji Fortel. Now, the goal of this project was to be able to create various HPCC systems cluster configurations, and the reason for this is that even though the default values that YAML has a lot of options, which are useful for a multitude of situations, there are scenarios where it may not always be ideal. The amount of content may also be overwhelming to beginner user. Smaller configurations are also useful for production, testing, debugging, support, and training, or if people with limited resources can't deploy default configurations, they may be able to deploy the smaller ones. Now, the two solutions that this project provides are overrides and HPCC Lite. Overrides is based on the default values of the YAML file and uses other files to modify portions of it. This means it only requires small changes, and it's best when only changing a few components. Now, HPCC Lite, on the other hand, cannot use the default as a YAML file, which I'll go into later, and because it can't, people can create whatever configurations they would like within the limitations of the schema file. This means that people have more room to customize things. However, it is a bit more work than overrides because it'd be creating all the files from scratch. Now, overrides, an example of a file from it is no Thor to Roxy's.yaml. Now, the Roxy's completely fit on the screenshot. However, as you can see, Thor is disabled and Roxy 2 is enabled, and outside the screenshot, the first Roxy is also enabled. Now, it's always important before deploying anything to make sure everything in the file is correct. But once that is verified, you can then go on to deploy and make sure that you're in the right directory, but then do Helm install, mycluster HPCC, and then set the version, which can be whatever you want. For this example, it's 9.2.2. And it's also important to pass the file with the source file, which in this case is values local file. And this is also an example of a local deployment on Docker desktop. Now, to verify that everything is working as it should, a good command to know is kubectl control get pods, which as you can see when this is run, see that Roxy Agent 1, Roxy Agent 2, and there are no Thors if you look closely. Now, another way to verify is going to ECO watch and going to the playground and make sure that you can run everything. HPCC Systems does have a document on this called data tutorial, which goes into it. Now, the other solution we have is HPCC Lite. But before we go into that, we need to go into HPCC Lite script. Now, as I mentioned earlier, users may find this a bit more work, more tedious, because it'd be creating all the files from scratch. However, HPCC Lite script automatically clones YAML files based on the default chart, which helps with this. Because as you can see the dictionaries, which is Roxy Thor in this case, which is what you want cloned, and then you can see HPCC Lite target path, which is where you want everything to go. First, you also need to make sure you have YAML and Python, but then after you run it, to make sure you have those, they'll then be cloned into the target path, which is, you can see the Roxy and Thor and everything. Now, to deploy HPCC Lite files, we'll start with common values.yaml because that's the simplest deployment. It's a custom values.yaml file that contains some basic functions such as global, definition, secrets, and ESP. Now, it's important to not use values.yaml on HPCC Lite because then when running Helm install, it'll automatically use the values.yaml instead of the common values.yaml. Now, after deploying everything though, to verify it's a bit different from overrides because it's for drop zone, and to verify that is different because you need to make sure that you can upload a file to drop zone rather than running in playground in ECO watch. Now, another file that's important, or files, would be the HPCC deployment files, because when adding more files to deploy in HPCC Lite, it can become more prone to error or typos, which are hard to catch manually. However, we have the Windows Bash and Linux Bash files for HPCC deployment, and as you can see, this is the Windows Bash example. There's Helm install my cluster, everything, and then the files I want to deploy, which in this case is common values.yaml, Thor, and Casa.yaml. And then there's also a storage file. In this case, this is an example of deployment on Azure. Now, something to keep in mind though is that the nature of this project is very experimental, but we do hope that it will be able to be integrated into the Helm chart one day. We also hope that we'll be able to have files similar to HPCC deployment that will be able to automatically run Helm install and deploy configurations, which will make everything a lot more simple. Some good resources would be the containerized HPCC systems platform, which goes into deployment, and as mentioned earlier, the data tutorial. There's also my GitHub that is linked here. Thank you.